Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball, a podcast where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by Eleni Kapetanios. Eleni is a practitioner of NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. She is also the creator of the Rapid Relief Method, where she helps people with PSTD heal without needing to rehash the trauma or talk about the issue that they're going through. Today is National Stress Awareness Day, so this will be a great episode for those who might be experiencing PSTD. So, Eleni, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, like you said, my name's Eleni, and I'm a master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And you want a little bit of background about kind of how I got to do what I do?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So I guess things kind of started when I had my son. So I had him at 26 weeks. So he was 3 months early, and it was sort of out of the blue, and it was a really traumatic experience. But and he's fine now. By the way, he's gigantic, and he was just 2 pounds when he was born, and it was a trauma, right? And so he ended up being okay. We brought him home, but I had this horrible anxiety and these fears, and I couldn't get past them, but I just kind of pushed them in and was like, I just have to suck it up and get on with things and, go about my business. But the feelings didn't go away, even though the experience had been resolved, right? And then I think it was probably related to the anxiety and stress. I developed an eating disorder and body image disorder. And so I was really struggling with anxiety and stress and trauma, and I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to go to traditional therapy and just talk about my problems over and over again and just relive them, right? So I was in a really bad, dark place, I would say. And I happened to be in a networking event. I had a personal training studio at the time. That was my business. And I heard a woman talking about this thing called NLP. And I'd never heard of it, but what I loved was that she said it was content free and you didn't have to talk about your problems. So I was like, all right, let's do it. Sign me up. And before I knew it, I was feeling like so much better, and it was super fast. So, and I would come home, but not really understand what we had been doing, because it wasn't like traditional therapy where you talk, right? So my husband would say, what did you guys do in your session? And I'd be like, I don't know, but I feel really good. And so then I had the opportunity to do my first level of certification in the process. And it was so fascinating to figure out exactly why it worked and how it all worked in the brain, because I love that kind of thing. And then I started attracting clients. And, people were just coming out of nowhere. And you know how when you're doing that thing that resonates with you, you start to attract more of it, right? And the personal training business was not doing it for me anymore. I wasn't enjoying it. I was loving the work I was doing with my NLP clients. So then, after about doing both businesses for a year, I got the chance to go to Nevada and train with Tad James, who is kind of one of the big wigs in the community of NLP. He's the creator of timeline therapy. And I was there for a month, and it blew me away. And I thought, okay, this is it. And I came home and closed my personal training studio and opened a clinic. And here we are 5 years later. So that is how I got here.
Well, I was going to ask you the same thing your husband asked. What do you do in NLP to make you feel good without having to talk about it? Can you explain now what you do,
Yeah,
or okay, let us know.
sure, sure. So the idea is that, well, so it all works in your unconscious mind, right? So our conscious mind is that rational mind, and it's the conscious mind that, tells us things like suck it up, it happened a long time ago, you'll be fine. But your unconscious mind is the part of your brain that's really driving the bus, right? Your unconscious mind is going to let you know when things aren't right, and it's going to start, I always say to my clients, first it starts to whisper to you, and then it will start to shake you where you have to do something about your problem, right? And so I work with the unconscious mind. And the idea is that everything we're feeling in the present moment that's making us feel uncomfortable has to do with past events. They can be really far back in the past. They can be a little bit more recent. But generally, when you're having those inappropriate, uncomfortable feelings in the present, it has to do with past events, right? So we call that the root cause. So if someone comes to me, say, with a problem like anxiety, to me, that is a symptom of the deeper underlying root cause. So what we do is we basically, it's just through a gentle sort of a visualization type process where you're in a light trance, where we go back to the first event, and your unconscious mind just sort of takes you there and lets you know the right place to go. And we release the negative emotion or event where it started in the past, so that now in the present, it's not affecting you anymore. So you have freedom from the emotion. And the reason it's content free is because I don't need to know. I don't need to know what event you're going back to. I only need to know what we call the positive learnings from the event. So all we can do from the past is learn, right? And when we have this negative event that's affecting us, and we all have, I'm sure, tons, right? Your unconscious mind sort of runs it in a loop, right? That negative loop, that anxiety loop. We've all felt it, I'm sure. And you can't break that pattern on its own. It's really hard to do. But when you look at an event a bit differently and get the positive instead of the negative from it, your brain can't run the pattern the same way. So it breaks that pattern, disconnects the negative from the event. So now we just have an event that we don't feel anything about. And that's where the power lays. So with the work, the reason it gets to be content free is because I only care about the emotions that come from these events, the beliefs that are created from the events and things like that. I don't need to know the details of the event. That doesn't matter not that it doesn't matter to me, but it doesn't affect the process. I might have a client that has had horrible traumas. All I really need to know is, okay, you had a trauma, you were 5 years old. I don't need you to rehash it. Tell me how it made you feel. Because it's the feelings that keep us trapped, not necessarily the events in and of themselves. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So let's talk about timeline therapy. Is that the same thing, or what is the difference between NLP and timeline therapy?
Yeah, timeline therapy is probably the modality I use the most. And I find that that is where we really are able to change the brain. So we're really changing the neurology in the brain to get rid of the negative neural patterns and reconnect them to positive. So they're both similar, but they're used a bit differently. And I use hypnosis as well. So I could talk a little bit about hypnosis if you want, because I find that there's a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us about the common misconceptions and your take on hypnosis.
So, all the work I do is about changing your brain and allowing your unconscious to heal. And sometimes our conscious mind puts up blocks, right? So, there might be some kind of reason why your unconscious mind doesn't maybe feel safe getting rid of a problem, or it's really invested in having some kind of an issue. So hypnosis is great to bypass your conscious mind and get deep into your unconscious. So that's why, you see these hypnosis shows where people are doing crazy things and then they don't remember it really. It's because the hypnotist is bypassing the conscious mind and going directly to the unconscious and speaking to that part of the brain. Now, I don't make my clients quack like a duck or anything like that, but what I do is I want to put positive suggestions into their unconscious. And I always say it's, sort of like the lazy person's therapy. You're just lying there, relaxing. I'm putting these, positive suggestions and changes into your brain, and then it just does it. You don't even have to do anything about it. So hypnosis is really just a deep state of relaxation. So you're just very relaxed, and your conscious mind is sort of taking a break, and then your unconscious mind is there to take on those suggestions and just to keep creating that neurological change. That's how I use it in my process.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
We'll talk about the rapid relief method. Tell us how it works and anything else that you want people to know about it.
Sure. So the rapid relief method is basically just how I organize these modalities when I work with a client. So when they first work with me, we do an intake session, and that's the only time they have to talk about their problem. So that's the time when they spill everything, because I need to find the patterns, and I also want to find the root problem. So your root problem, it's usually something like unsafe, inadequate, unworthy, those kinds of words. And generally when we find it, the client knows, like they have a very, it really resonates with them. They know exactly, when I say it. And then from there, I make a list of all the negative emotions that have come up, the beliefs about themselves, any traumas, and also, there might be events from their past that aren't necessarily traumas, but they are what we call significant emotional events. So they're still big events that are emotionally charged, but they weren't necessarily traumas. And I have a list of that, because we're going to work through that. And then I also do a test with them, because I want to see, it's just 56 questions we go through, and I want to see where they're at today in specific areas of their life, because I do it again with them at the end of our work. It's about a 3-month process. And then we can see the changes on a graph. So it's actually really, really cool. And after that intake session, we get right into the work. So the first thing that we release is anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt in one session. And then we start to work our way through the list. And I bring in lots of different modalities other than timeline therapy as we go, depending on the client. And I also have like a membership portal where I will send them, different brain changing techniques I want them to work on to help manage their emotions, journaling prompts, meditations, that kind of thing. So they're doing the work on their own, but then I'm also doing the work with them one-on-one. So, basically that is the process.
What kind of people have you helped with the rapid relief method, and what kind of people, clients, I should say, are you able to help with the rapid relief method?
So I can help people with lots of different types of presenting problems. So, obviously anxiety is huge right now, especially through COVID. Depression, PTSD or traumas. So I've helped people who have, done tours of Iraq. I've helped people who have been sexually assaulted, have had childhood abuse. I help people who have, issues sleeping, issues in relationships, like you're always picking the wrong partner, attracting the wrong partner. I also do a lot of work with cancer survivors because that's a very traumatic thing to go through. And we want to make sure that, our unconscious mind and our brain and our body are both on the same page as far as creating health. And I've worked with alcohol issues. I don't work with addicts who are still using. So you have to be not using in order to do this work and really want to heal from it. I've helped people with fertility issues. Obviously not a doctor, but there's a lot of emotional baggage that goes along with not being able to get pregnant. So I've worked with both husbands and wives around those types of issues. What else? Yeah, and people from all different walks of life. I have a lot of clients who are doctors, surgeons, executives, but then I also have people who are, just normal people, business people, people from all walks of life. But the most important thing is that they have to really want to do the work. I have women I work with and they'll say, oh, I want you to fix my husband. Well, only if he thinks that he needs fixing, right? And I'm not fixing anyone, they're fixing themselves. But so, those are really the types of people that I like to work with, people who are really ready to make those changes and invest in their health. People who I don't work with are, different types of mental disorders like, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, addicts that are still using. Those kinds of things are out of my scope of practice. I would refer those on. And I can work with children, but it's not really my jam. So I have some practitioners that I refer kids to. It works really, really well with kids, but it's very quick with kids. My son has done a lot of work with one of my colleagues. So, kids are great in a few sessions. It's very simple for them.
Well, for listeners who might not know what PTSD is, explain what it is so they'll know.
Sure. So PTSD, it's actually classified as a brain injury. It's an injury to your brain from trauma. So not physical trauma necessarily, but emotional trauma. So you can actually see it in a brain scan when you compare a traumatized brain to a normal brain. So it can be caused from, abuse, war, horrible situations, assaults. Sometimes people have trauma from accidents, car accidents, witnessing abuse of other people. It is quite individual. I mean, what I went through with my son being born, I would classify that as a trauma. Illness, death around you, that kind of thing, can all result in PTSD. I don't diagnose it. That's not something that I do. So what I do is I take it at the client's word. So if they say, I've been diagnosed with PTSD, or I have had something that I think is a trauma, then we treat it as such. Because, with my work, if they believe that they have had something traumatic happen to them, then that's what, how we work on it. So it can be, officially diagnosed, but it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is how they feel about it and the emotions and problems that they have from it. And, some of the symptoms of trauma or PTSD, it almost feels like you're living in it all the time. So your brain is keeping you in that trauma all the time. So you might have nightmares, you can't sleep, you're hypervigilant. I had a client who had been sexually assaulted, and she was constantly checking her locks, checking her windows. She was afraid to go out by herself. Fears, anxieties, all that kind of thing can be part of the issues that go along with PTSD.
Are there any current or upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about?
Sure. So I also do group coaching, which I just started doing, and I didn't know how it was going to go, but it's going really, really well. So it's a small group, and it's cool because you don't have to talk about your problems, but you can still stay private with the actual events, and we just release the emotions, right? So I release it one-on-one with the participants, but we're in a group setting. And then there's online modules for them to work through on their own. And the cool thing is that, so when I release an emotion with someone, you can really actually see the changes on their face. Some people get really pink. You can see that release happen. So the cool thing is that the people in the group are seeing that in each other. And then, the other cool thing is that they're realizing, I'm not alone in feeling this emotion, right? Because we all can feel very alone in dealing with our stuff. And, we're getting into working through limiting beliefs actually tomorrow. And we were talking a little bit about it last week. And, so many people had very similar negative beliefs about themselves. And then, people were saying, wow, I'm not the only one. That's so cool. That's something that I'm doing, and I'm going to be doing more and more of the group coaching because I think it's really beneficial. And I have a lot of content on my Instagram and my Facebook. So it's at Breakthrough Eleni, and it's Breakthrough THRU and then ELENI. And I've just actually started my own podcast called the No Bullshit. Can I say that? No Bullshit Breakthrough that it just launched a couple of days ago. So yeah, I'm always working on new things.
Right. Well, if that's the name of your podcast, it's not like you're just saying it just to be saying it, but
I'm not.
Give out your website too, since you already gave out your Instagram.
Oh, sure. It's www.breakthroughwitheleni.com. And the breakthrough is spelled THROUGH.
All right. So give us some final thoughts to close it out.
I think just that, a lot of people I work with feel like they can't be helped, and they feel like they've tried everything and that nothing is going to work. And, they might have been told by, professionals that they can't be healed, that they're just going to have to manage the symptoms forever. And I'm just here to say that isn't true. There's hope. You haven't probably tried this yet. And I have a 97% success rate with my clients. So don't feel hopeless. There is hope out there for you, and, I can help.
And you're worldwide, right?
Yeah, I work remotely, so I can work with anyone, anywhere.
So if you are going through some trauma, or listeners, if you know somebody that's going through trauma, contact Eleni Kapetanios. Make sure you follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. And Android listeners, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. Eleni, on National Stress Awareness Day, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk to you.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.